Here we are. So I believe we're live now. Kath?
Yep.
We are.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order of the October 14th meeting of the Massachusetts Health Connector. We have a quorum and it's good to see everyone. Before we go into the formal part of our agenda, I just would like to take this moment to welcome Keisha Omar Jack, who is the representative who was recently appointed to the board by our Attorney General, Maura Healy. Keisha will give you a second to introduce yourself, but what I know about you is that you're the Chief Human Resources Officer at Upstream USA. It's actually an organization I know well. And you have extensive experience in human resources leadership, employee benefits, and organizational strategy. So welcome to this extraordinary board and organization with Louis and his staff. And if you would like to just say a few things, you don't need to, and then we'll go into our formal meeting. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Very excited to be part of the board. In addition to what was shared in the bio, my experience has been as an HR leader over the past 25 plus years, working in a variety of industries: manufacturing, telecommunications, hospitality, food distribution, and banking. So what I really hope to provide as part of this board is the perspective of coming from a variety of different industries, in the employer seat, but also in the consumer seat, and really understanding working with different healthcare plans and building up schemes which were competitive, but also realizing the challenges that some of our employees faced in terms of a living wage and being able to afford the plans that we were trying to even provide as an organization. So on a personal note, I live in Massachusetts here, like all of you. I'm on the South Shore. I have 2 young boys, and I'm my husband. We all live here on the South Shore, and just really excited to dig in and learn so much from all of you. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like we also have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn from you and your experience that you bring to the Connector board. So again, welcome. And with that, so we are doing this meeting virtually. So we do all things by roll call. So once we're back together in person, we won't be doing these roll calls, but as we take votes, that's how we have to conduct our business in alignment with the open meeting law in the Commonwealth. So with that, we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was September 9th. So may I have a motion to accept the minutes, please? All right, that is Nancy Turnbull with a motion. Is there a second, please?
Second.
All right, and I think that second came from Mark. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? All right, Kathy.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Kevin.
Yay.
Michael.
Yay.
Ruth.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Cassandra.
Yeah.
Dimitri.
Yes.
Secretary.
So I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, okay. Nancy.
Morning, Kathy. Yes.
Morning. Matt.
Yes.
Rena.
Yes.
And Keisha, I will call your name. If you need to
Abstain as well as I was not there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Okay, the minutes carry. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Louis for the executive director's report. And it's been a busy time. Of course, with its challenges whenever we make a big transition. And I'm sure we'll get the details from Louis and how things are operating today on the call center. So with Louis, let me turn it over to you.
Good morning. We are really looking forward to commencing the 2022 open enrollment shortly on November 1st. On our operations side, we have transitioned call center vendors with the last steps taken over the last 5 days. And we are working to fully stabilize operations with our new service provider. System technical difficulties delayed effective opening of calling operations from Tuesday morning to midday yesterday, causing member disruption for the past 2 days. Significant issues impairing inbound calling have since been diagnosed and addressed. And Vicky and I will elaborate on the cutover and plans for going forward in the first agenda item today. With regard to member benefits, outreach, and assistance, we continue to work toward operational changes that will eliminate loss of subsidy danger for tens of thousands of members that we noted at last month's meeting as an unintended consequence of federal tax changes. Marissa will detail the progress we made in addressing this issue during today's presentation, thanks to new flexibility clarified by federal CMS. Our outreach team is ready to return to the road, returning to a community-based grassroots series of activities designed to increase awareness of open enrollment. And our navigators and assisters have been meeting for training throughout the summer and into the fall, updated with the various changes that members and new applicants will consider this open enrollment. Also today, we will provide a policy update from Audrey Gasteyer as there continues to be ongoing discussion on federal healthcare policy that directly impacts our work and our members' coverage. Those potential policy changes will help define how we continue to provide the most affordable coverage possible to nearly 270,000 people who currently rely on us to deliver the kind of health coverage they deserve. We will continue to keep an eye on these developments and understand their impacts to our mission and the members of the Massachusetts public. And lastly, I wanted to note a numeric milestone. Numeric milestones are always a little arbitrary, but I want to note that a little over 3 years ago, we completed the full launch of our new Health Connector for Business platform. At the time, we had less than 6,000 members, but we're eager to provide small businesses with new choice options and an easy-to-use application and enrollment process. This month, we reached the 10,000 member threshold. While still modest, this milestone reflects the success we have had in creating a new option for small businesses. And our growth has come at a time when the rest of the small group market has shown some decline because of economic pressures. From March of 2018 to March of 2021, the HCB enrollment growth of 56% compares to the state's overall small group market decline of 12%. We created Health Connector for Business with the promise of providing an easy-to-use platform for small business and brokers to access quality, lower-cost healthcare for employees. Our HCB team has worked tirelessly with community small business groups to increase visibility. And we have seen the membership grow through a community of 460 certified brokers who have provided their clients with access to Health Connector for Business. We greatly appreciate their working with us on behalf of small business. And so as we enter almost the open enrollment period, we want to thank you for your continued support and guidance as we work to deliver quality healthcare to everyone who needs it. Thank you. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. And if not,
Any questions, or we'll go right into the contact center implementation update, but let me just pause for a second. Anyone? Oh. All right, contact center implementation update.
Good morning, all. Erin's gonna show my slides, please. Thank you, Erin. Erin, if you could move to the next slide. So as Lewis said, he and I will be providing you an update today regarding the contact center implementation scope, timeline, and the go live activities of the past 2 days. This project was and is an important cornerstone in fulfilling our goals to service our current members and prospective members at the level they expect and deserve, while continuing to set a foundation to add features and functions to support future program changes and growth. Could you please move to the next slide, Erin? So as a refresher, this implementation kicked off in June 7th to be exact, with the goal to be live in early October in time to stabilize operations prior to open enrollment beginning on November 1st. So the scope in a very compressed timeline was broad and deep. It included installing a new set of systems, an IVR, a customer relationship management system and reporting platforms and others, and ensuring all agents were trained in every aspect of our program, both policy and procedures, to handle the wide variety of questions and concerns from eligibility to enrollment, document processing or payment that our members call in and request service on. In addition, we needed to establish the appropriate management structures and oversight so that we have quality assurance, CSAT, and the reports needed to ensure we're achieving the results we want. So in the bottom, there's a little timeline where the kickoff on June 7th, we got CMS approval, trained over 400 agents, developed all our SOPs. The telephones got moved from our former vendor to our current one. We had to migrate all our data, and then we went live on the 12th. So again, just a refresher of the scope and the timeline. I'm now going to turn it over to Lewis, who's going to talk about Cutover and Production, and then I'll take it back for talking about where we go from here.
Thank you, Vicky. We did have a bad stumble on opening day to the detriment of member access. The system cause has since been addressed, though many other settling in actions will still be necessary over the next couple of weeks and on. And Vicky will talk about those in the next slide, but I think I need to address the opening, starting with Friday evening when so-called system cutover activities really began. That's the point at which our prior vendor was removed from service connections. Data migration from the prior vendor's systems commenced that evening. And after a long 24/7 weekend of cutover activities, I did render a new system go for production deployment early on Monday morning, October 11th. Call center agents were scheduled to receive incoming calls as of 8 a.m. on Tuesday. For unknown reasons, on Tuesday, early into production operations, we began experiencing trouble accepting inbound member calls. This remained the case throughout Tuesday and into the morning, Wednesday, October 13th. Accenture, our new call center vendor, worked with their vendor partners, Amazon Web Services and Salesforce, throughout the day, evening, and night on Tuesday, October 12th, and a root cause and resolution was determined by Wednesday noon, October 13th. The root cause was relating to very complex interactions between certain calling features, the interactive voice response system, and usage volumes. These interactions had not been discovered in earlier testing, despite several rounds of acceptable high volume testing, but there was an area of high volume testing that was missed. As of yesterday afternoon, stable inbound operations have commenced and calls are coming into agents. And I think I would just take a pause here for any questions people might have.
Louis,
Go ahead, Nancy.
yeah, when you say there was an area of high volume testing that was missed, was that one that should have been done, or was this such an odd confluence of these different factors that it was very bad luck? But
well, I would say the following. You know, as executive director and a former CIO, it's never reasonable to experience an opening day like this. It was a very complex interplay of systems. And so I guess what I would say is, in retrospect, now that we know what the problem was, we should have tested that aspect of the connection between AWS and Salesforce. I wouldn't have known, and it wasn't omitted for any reason other than lack of knowledge of that interaction. So in that sense, it's certainly an error that I own on behalf of the organization, but it was very non-obvious.
So can I just, Louis, as a non-technical person, and I appreciate that, you accept the responsibility of this, but there was, because I had been informed of the multiple rounds or the several rounds of successful high volume testing. So I want to sort of like just echo a little bit of, Nancy sort of beat me to the question, is there was a confluence of factors that, given all the testing and all the prep up to that point, there was, yes, in hindsight, but there was nothing to lead one to assume that that was a vulnerability in this systems interface that needed to be validated. I guess is how I would say that as a social worker, non-technical person. And as I was receiving the updates over the weekend, I have to say, given the complexity of all of the technology, I have to say from where I sit, the fact that quickly you and the team and Accenture pivoted to then identify the root cause and then be live Wednesday or whenever we were then open for call center was, of course, unfortunate for the people who were trying to call, right? And that's, we never want poor customer service because that's been our goal throughout this, that it was, from my reading of everything and understanding, was quickly ameliorated and addressed and not just fixed. But I guess, again, that it's coming from the non-technical person executive on this as the board chair. So again, all of us regret any negative interaction for our customers and their inability for a period of time to call. But it appears from where I sit, this has been rapidly addressed by the connector team and the Accenture at high leadership level. But please correct me if I misread my texts and emails about this.
I thank you, Secretary. And I would assure our board that testing at every level was extensive. We did unit testing of new development. We did testing with production-like data. We did load testing of the IVR system. We did load testing of the IVR calls to Softium. We did load testing of the concurrent calls in Salesforce. But there was an area of interaction between Amazon Web Services and Salesforce that we missed. But we are back. We have commenced inbound operations. Calls are coming into agents. We have a long queue of callbacks that we intend to make because it was both a 3-day weekend and a day and a half of disruption. But that's what we're about. We're going to be about the business of being fully stable for open enrollment and moving forward. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Dimitri.
I just wanted to say, being a systems person, it's never an easy task to put into production a major system and to ensure that every aspect of that system is thoroughly tested to the best of one's ability. Sometimes things slip through the cracks and situations surface that were not planned for, that may have been overlooked in testing. I certainly appreciate the speed at which you were able to turn things around and address the issue. My question more or less is, given the many different entities or systems that need to communicate to ensure smooth operations moving forward. What have we learned from this to ensure as we move forward that we are proactively monitoring and managing all these interface points so that we don't experience a similar outage due to some unforeseen interface interacting between the systems?
My answer is going to be pretty deeply technical, Dimitri, and I apologize to the board for that, but I have gained a deep new appreciation for configuration settings in Amazon Web Services as they relate to call volumes going into Salesforce. Now, that's a particular area. It's a particular area that I'm not heretofore deeply familiar with. I am now very deeply appreciative of. You know, I think in general, we very carefully and closely monitor all performance in real time throughout the day. We look at call volumes, we look at abandonment rates. We have in these past 3 days and going forward a so-called green room where technical and operational staff are all on the line together all day long to make sure that if anything arises in terms of hiccups on logins or whatever, that the whole team is there to respond. So while there's never a guarantee in life, I do think that this, how would we say, all-pervasive defect is not something that I expect to recur. And I don't know if that's responsive, Dimitri, but.
No, that's great. I just want to make sure that we're learning from the experience and that we don't get like twice by the same issue as we move forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Anyone else as Louis moves on through this? Go ahead.
Okay, so Vicky, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Louis. So now that we're in full production, the connector staff will be working diligently with our Accenture partners to prioritize the areas of focus for these initial days prior to open enrollment and then beyond. In addition to daily work associated with monitoring production, the initial areas of focus are expeditiously resolving tickets logged by agents for system access. You know, we're 100% remote. This is new to all the agents. So we have in this green room, which Louis spoke about, tickets get logged, we track them and track closure. The other thing that we're doing is we're monitoring through workforce management, which is where the Accenture team shows us the different queues and what is happening with the call center. We're monitoring our average handle time and our customer satisfaction to look for themes to then drive back through training to the workforce for areas of improvement or shoring up. We also, as you know, have an inventory of cases that relate to enrollment, eligibility, refunds, or document processing that members have either sent to us or asked us to research. So we're making sure that that inventory management is going to be managed to the established turnaround times for each of these different areas. We're gaining familiarity with the reporting suite now that we're live with Accenture so that jointly we can monitor results in key areas across the program and shore up anything that we need to. And then last but not least, we have a quality assurance program, which I spoke about, which was part of the scope, and that we're using to monitor constantly the performance of the frontline agents or back office in order to, again, drive constant performance improvement. So we're going to prioritize also any technical tickets that we might need for break fix, but that is not the top of my list at the moment. It's these things. Could you move to the next slide, please, Erin? So as you would expect, we're going to continue to work closely with Accenture to ensure the results are expected and that they're being delivered. We will, of course, provide regular updates to the board about performance and where we are overall with operations as we start to move through the year in open enrollment. And I did want to thank you, the board, for your continued support for both this implementation and operations. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Vicky. Any questions?
Vicky, thank you for your report. I had a quick question for you with regard to support staff and labor in general. I know I read a lot in the news in terms of employee retention, especially with folks in certain operations. Are we seeing any issue in terms of call center support staff, and whether or not we seeing any concerns with employees who may not be staying on the job, or is that something that has not surfaced with the connector?
Yeah, Vicky, if I could take that. We are seeing retention challenges. People who made it through training but have decided for whatever reasons to move on. So we will be engaging new classes and new sources of staffing. So I know we will get to the right place, but I think that it's going to be a work throughout the season to make sure that we are staffed to capacity. But that's a very keen observation, Dimitri. But we are creating incentive programs. We are looking at every source of staffing, and I trust that we will be fine for open enrollment.
Thank you, Lois.
And to pick up on something, I think it was Nancy months ago, but you know, it's been a long period since 20 months ago, so everything's like one long day. Individuals have benefits, right?
Yes.
Right. These are not independent contractors, but these are people and the companies have benefits.
Yes.
I do recall, despite I sort of live in the world of COVID, that was the conversation we had at the board level, if I recall correctly. Right. I see Bayruth nodding her head, so I'm hoping that's like somebody else remembers that conversation. All right.
I have a question as well, please.
Yes, Keisha, please.
What is the full window of enrollment? I see that it's beginning on November 1st. What is the full window?
It'll feel like it's all 12 months, but it's not. But go ahead, Louis.
Yeah. November 1st through January 23rd. Which may be a good segue into Marissa as the item.
So before you do, I do have one as we go through this next period, and I know there will be an update to the board. Will be, and you always provide call center metrics and data for us. I think given the bump in the road, I think, and I know you will tightly manage this, I think that information for us will just be, you know, for all of us will be extra helpful, I think. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure Vicky, it's high on your list, but
Yes,
right.
we will provide it.
Yeah. So Keisha's comment, I think, is the perfect segue into the 2022 open enrollment readiness preview. So is that Marissa?
Yes, good morning. My slides. Okay, can everyone see those? Good morning. So today we'll walk through preparations for open enrollment for 2022 plans, which begins on November 1st and runs through January 23rd. During this time, members and applicants can enroll or change plans for any reason. And they may also see changes in benefits, costs, and subsidies as the plan year renews. We'll review our progress through our annual redetermination and renewal process, as well as touch on areas of special focus for us this year. Higher than usual redeterminations to unsubsidized coverage, the continuing impact of the American Rescue Plan, outreach and education, and the looming end of the federal public health emergency. Each year, we follow the same general timeline in preparation for the new plan year. that begins in January. We start in late August by reviewing data that we have on file and data gathered from state and federal sources to make our best projection of eligibility for the renewal year. Members receive notices with this information and are encouraged to update their information for next year prior to the Health Connector issuing renewal notices in October, which contain plan and premium information, and we're midway through this step now. In November, shopping begins, and we'll send renewal transactions to carriers mid-month for those who choose not to shop. January bills go out on 12/1, and payment to effectuate January coverage is due 12/23. Open enrollment for non-group plans sold directly by carriers will also run from November 1st to January 23rd per a forthcoming bulletin from the Division of Insurance. We always appreciate the division's willingness to align to our OE window, so thank you to Kevin and Commissioner Anderson by extension. In terms of hours, we'll add to our usual weekday 8 to 6 hours with extended evening and special weekend hours close to the December and January payment due dates.
Marissa, can you just go back?
Sure.
In addition to hours of operation, can you just walk through what language availability for individuals?
Sure. So I know we do have a language line that's available, so that if someone calls in and needs translation services, a telephonic interpreter can be engaged relatively quickly. I don't know off the top of my head whether there are bilingual agents at Accenture. I know that
There are, Marissa. We have Spanish lines, and you can select Spanish in the IVR as an option to then conduct your entire call in Spanish. And we have agents that are bilingual and they're certified in bilingual. It's not just you get to say you're bilingual, they're certified in that. And then of course the language line can be used for myriad of languages, but also if Spanish queue is full, people can then take a call and also get Spanish to the language line.
Thank you, Vicky.
Sorry, may I follow up on that? Is that the only language, Spanish, no Vietnamese or Haitian Creole? You're on mute.
I would say that that's the case for the call-in contact center. However, we also have a broad network of community navigators that we specifically hire for their language facility and various other languages that are common to a community.
Mm-hmm.
And so our navigator support system has really quite broad language facility.
Okay, but help me to understand, is that separate from the enrollment process? So the call center is separate from the enrollment?
They both can get someone enrolled. People enjoy going to the navigators because they're awfully good at the help they provide and the language facility.
Mm-hmm.
The contact center is, for people who feel comfortable doing the whole process over the phone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the navigators are community-based navigators through trusted partners and organizations. Having just recently been up, I think, with Lewis up in Lawrence with a community organization that does serve the really reaching into community by folks who live in the community and have the language and cultural norms of the community in order to really reach people in addition to the call center. But the call center is completely fluent in English and Spanish, and then with translation to other, I think it's like 100 languages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, via the language line, yes.
Right, via the language line.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of what we expect to see this year for membership, I want to flag that the ongoing Medicaid protections associated with the federal public health emergency or PHE are likely to depress enrollment this open enrollment. Last year, we saw that while enrollments from individuals new to the HICS system held relatively steady, far fewer individuals with existing HICS applications enrolled in qualified health plans or QHPs. There are currently over 250,000 fewer individuals with the QHP eligibility than there were in 2019. However, we do expect this to return to more typical levels of QHP eligibility once the PHE ends and would expect increases in enrollment both as individuals transition off of Mass Health and in the subsequent open enrollment period.
Marissa, what's the timing of that going to be?
We'll touch on that a little bit later, but that's,
Okay,
I think,
that's fine.
the million-dollar question that everyone would love to know. So we don't have an end date as of now.
Okay, great, thanks.
Nancy, you asking the end date of the federal emergency or the beginning of redeterminations, or both?
Well, I guess both.
Yeah. There is discussion about the on the Medicaid side of the federal emergency being extended beyond the end of the calendar year. But, you know, we should hear something. We have to hear, I think, by early November, but Marissa may have actually the specific date we need to hear by. Excuse me.
Yes, the current emergency declaration goes through kind of, I think, the middle of this month, but they typically will issue an extension of that very close to when it expires. So I've been checking every day and haven't seen an extension yet, but I'm assuming it's coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so if no other questions on this section, I can move into our special considerations for this year. So when we ran our 2022 eligibility projections, we noticed a much higher number of individuals than expected for whom we couldn't verify continued subsidy eligibility. And when we explored this, we found many members for whom the IRS returned alternative income data to what we would normally receive. They returned adjusted gross income, or AGI, instead of modified adjusted gross income, or MAGI. IRS provides AGI if a return has been adjusted, and we discovered that IRS automatically adjusted a large number of returns as it implemented provisions of the American Rescue Plan this spring that impacted 2020 tax liability. After further discussion, CMS authorized the Health Connector and other exchanges to use AGI data to verify applicants' incomes. And we've worked with our systems vendor to find a pathway to do this quickly later this month, averting subsidy loss for about 50,000 members. And just to illustrate what we're seeing and how it compares to prior years, here the magenta line shows the percentage of currently subsidized enrollees with an unsubsidized 2022 eligibility over time. So we're currently around 48%, or 108,000 individuals, compared to about 20% of members in prior years. So you can see there's a data label early on in this process for each of the years shown here. And that reflects when we completed our preliminary eligibility process for that year. And so there's some volatility among smaller populations before that happens. But you can see that we had almost 129,000 members projected to lose subsidies as we completed our preliminary eligibility process in early September. That's been going down as members have updated their applications and provided us with new information, kind of reestablishing their eligibility for subsidies. They may need to send proof of their income after that. And then the dotted portion of that line projects a combination of member reported updates and that technical work that I just mentioned to verify income using the AGI data. And that's expected to put us back along kind of the normal trajectory that we've seen in prior years by the end of the month. But let me pause there for questions on this subsidy loss topic, as I know it gets arcane quickly.
Marissa, there's a lot of action in the dots on this graph. I'm trying to get a sense of how, I don't know the word, aspirational that path is versus how really comfortable you are. I realize there's a lot of work being done. There's obviously people that move. I'm much more worried about people moving to no coverage because they don't realize they can transition to subsidized coverage. So they get determined to not be eligible for subsidies when in fact with some extra work they would be. But instead of that extra work happening one way or another, they get lost to the system. And so obviously it would be great if we could stay on that dotted line. I just wanted to get your sense of confidence and how we reach out to the ones that might be lost to the system.
Yep.
Marissa, if I could take the first part of that.
Sure.
I want to just assure people that the dotted line is not kind of a hope. What the dotted line represents in its principal declines are the AGI repair, or the AGI workaround operations that will take place on weekends for the balance of this month, restore subsidy to members that are AGI eligible. And so those are very concrete system activities. We know the count of members whose subsidies are projected to be restored by AGI. So the steep drops here are basically represent weekend tranches of subsidy restoration to 40,000 some members. As Marissa said, it also includes an assumed downward trend similar to that on the actuals part of the line, just because there is continued activity of members coming in and updating their accounts. And I'm sorry, Marissa.
No, no problem. So I think this may also help to answer your question. We're not relying on this verification process alone. We have a lot of communications going out to members to help them understand what their projected eligibility is and how they can provide their most up-to-date information and ensure that they're getting the right amount of subsidies. And we do find that as this kind of the fall goes on, it becomes more and more concrete to people. And so this month, when they get that renewal notice that says, here's what your premium is without subsidies, they'll see that and say, whoa, I really need to come in and update my information. That December 1st bill run for January coverage has a very similar effect where people say, oh, gee, I haven't done that yet. I really need to get on that. And so we're using a variety of channels here, paper mail, email, automated calls, so that we can reach members and support them in making the updates that they need to make. So transitioning to the American Rescue Plan and its impacts, we're really pleased that the enhanced subsidies provided by the ARP will continue to make coverage more affordable than ever in 2022. And we're incorporating that into our messaging for the first and potentially only open enrollment unless Congress acts to extend subsidies. We recognize that many people may not have been willing to switch to the Health Connector mid-year from off exchange, but may want to for 2022. And we've asked our carriers to alert non-group enrollees off exchange to the existence of these subsidies that are available through the Health Connector. This OE, we also have the Get an Estimate tool that we launched this spring, which lets someone put in their zip code, income, and age, and produces a very high level estimate of the kinds of subsidies and net premiums available to that person. It only takes a few seconds and it's been really popular. We averaged about 1,000 page views per weekday during open enrollment and about 500 per weekday from August to now, which is wonderful. We are, however, watching one population that will have a slightly different ARP experience, those who received unemployment during 2021. And as a result, we're able to enroll in $0 coverage. That provision of the law expires at the end of this year, and we have about 28,000 members who benefited from it who will transition to less generous subsidies. We have special messaging planned for them to explain this change with emphasis added around the December 23rd and January 23rd deadlines. And we'll also be tracking this population, eligibility changes they experience and shopping choices that they're making. And we will report back on what we learn about that.
Marissa, can I ask a question? First of all, the new tool is wonderful. It's so easy to use and great to be able to go in, and I've used it with some friends and others, so that's a great addition to the website. In terms of the people who are going to face higher premiums because of the unemployment income issue, do we have any idea what the distribution of those folks are in terms of where they're going to fall? And some of them, I imagine, lose tax credits entirely, depending on.
Yeah, some may. We can pull that data for you. I don't have it at the ready, but we definitely can identify them and see what their 2022 looks like as of now. So I'll take that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
In the outreach and education space, we're very excited to return to in-person activities as safely as possible in communities that have been identified as those with higher uninsured rates. Over the last year and a half, we have tailored messaging to address populations impacted by COVID-19 and new policies that have come out of the pandemic, like the ARP. For OE22, we're returning to a focus on the state's chronically uninsured with continued messaging to those who are eligible for subsidies through the ARP. We're also working on a slate of community-based grassroots activities that get in front of our communities of focus in attention-grabbing ways. We found that being able to make a connection, even a brief one-on-one encounter at a public event, can really help drive our messaging and encourage enrollment. Part of our messaging will reflect that COVID-19 remains a reality and that having health insurance is more important than ever, a message that targets all of our populations. We'll be encouraging people to look again at the Health Connector with the prospect of new or additional subsidy to make coverage more affordable. Paid media will remain largely with ethnic media outlets. Over time, we've built strong relationships with outlets that have strong followings in their communities, and they add a trusted voice to our outreach. As we have in recent years, we'll continue to sponsor call-in events on radio and TV, creating an avenue for people to call in with their questions and to get information from trusted sources. These events are also highly promoted in advance, which creates additional visibility. We're also happy to inform you that we have added a navigator for Open Enrollment 22 in Lowell. We're in the middle of our 2-year Navigator grant cycle, but we felt it was important to try to add an organization in Lowell where we've previously been unable to find partners, but where we know there's a disproportionate rate of uninsurance. Our new Navigator, the Lowell Community Health Center, will also be subcontracting with the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association, creating an additional partnership to support one of the largest Cambodian populations in the nation. So let me just pause on the outreach topic before I move on. Does anybody have any questions on that? Then our last area of special focus isn't directly related to open enrollment, but we will definitely be working on it during this time, which is planning for the potential end to the federal public health emergency, or PHE, at some point next year. As I noted earlier, Mass Health is maintaining members' coverage during the PHE, including benefits for about 200,000 individuals who would have otherwise been determined eligible for Health Connector coverage. We don't have information yet about when the PHE will end. An additional kind of qualitative guidance about how it will be unwound is expected from the federal government this fall. But we are working closely with Mass Health to ensure as coordinated a process as possible to minimize individuals becoming uninsured when benefit protections end. And again, we're expecting to see enrollment begin to climb once that process starts, as well as a return to kind of the more typical membership trends that we've seen for subsequent open enrollment periods. So lots of question marks here, but certainly on our radar. Any questions on this one? So over the next few weeks, we'll complete our renewal noticing and implement our alternative verifications that I mentioned. Shopping begins November 1st, and we'll send our renewal transactions to carriers mid-month. In December, our focus will be on payments to effectuate January coverage, and then we'll move into communications in January about acting before OE ends and preparing for filing 2021 tax returns, with shopping wrapping up on January 23rd. As always, our key priorities are to support our existing and new members to make it as easy as possible for them to maintain coverage or enroll, including by retaining their subsidies where appropriate. We'll continue to seek out the remaining uninsured and make sure they're aware of the significant affordability assistance offered by the American Rescue Plan that can help them get covered when it's more important than ever. And we will look forward to updating you on our progress in future meetings. Any last questions before I hand it over to Audrey?
I have just a quick comment, Marissa. Thanks for this update. I feel like I need to give my monthly plea that as people start losing their subsidies and come back into the rank or having less subsidies than what they have right now and start feeling the sting of the high cost of health insurance premiums, which are directly related to the high cost of healthcare, I just hope we can get in front of this instead of reacting and making decisions that will cost the state and everyone else money instead of just dealing with the underlying root problem, which is high healthcare costs.
Marissa, may I make a comment?
Yep, please.
Lewis at the beginning noted the 3rd anniversary of our new small business program. And when he said that, that somehow kicked me into thinking of other anniversaries. So I think it's worth noting that November 1st is going to be the 15th anniversary of the Connector Care program. And I happen to know, because I was shopping for an anniversary present for a friend who is having their 15th anniversary, that the traditional gift there is crystal. And one of the reasons it's crystal is because crystal is very durable. And I can't help but reflecting on the 15th anniversary and the durability of the law and the program through ups and downs of policy challenges and the economy, and unfortunately a pandemic and some operational challenges along the way, how very durable this law has been and the commitment of the Commonwealth to this law. So I just wanted to note that before we move on.
Yep. Thanks, Nancy. I'm glad you were the one who commented on the 15th anniversary. I was reflecting on it the other day just because I was doing something. I was like, oh my God, it's 15 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hope it doesn't go into a difficult teenager.
No, I think the
So far, so good.
The toddler years were enough.
Yes, that's true. That's true. They were.
Marissa, I did have a question, if it's okay. Can we go back to the slide where you had the forecast for enrollment, please?
This one or the earlier one with the bars?
I think it's the one with the bars. It's how many we're anticipating for the 2022 enrollment.
So I've included here kind of where we are right now. I would need to just double check with our finance team what that forecast number is for January coverage for 2022. But as I mentioned, I would say we're not expecting to see the kinds of robust new enrollment that we've typically seen in prior years. So we'll probably stay pretty flat. So we may continue to hover around that 270,000 enrollee mark as we go into January, but I can definitely confirm that forecast number for you with our finance team.
That would be great. And also, what came to mind was, have there been any correlation or reviews of the movement of unemployment rates around these times to also see if those trends are also impacting the numbers that we're seeing for the forecast?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we can definitely take a look at that. You know, there are a lot of complexities around income calculation for Medicaid, which looks at a point in time, versus the exchange, which looks at the kind of yearly expectation. And so we see a little bit kind of less volatility in terms of that annual projection if people know when their benefits are set to expire. But we do know that a lot of people lost unemployment benefits in September when federal extensions expired. So we can take a look at that and kind of provide some more color in that space to understand who may have ended that income, but maybe didn't report a job instead and may still be unemployed versus someone who may have transitioned to a job after that. So we can take a look at that more deeply.
Helpful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, this is Matt Vino from the GIC. I can't help but draw a connection between Rena's comment and Nancy's comment because I think they're both part of the same story. That the reason that we have been so successful as a Commonwealth in maintaining this framework, despite all the kind of buffeting challenges, many from outside of the Commonwealth, is that we've been able to work together. And I would say the durability of this framework is directly related to the affordability question. And if we are to be successful in ensuring another 5, 10, 15 years of this framework, then collectively we're going to have to really put our shoulders into the affordability question. So I want to take that opportunity just to connect those two, because I think they're inextricably linked.
Yeah, I fully agree with that comment.
I think it is also an opportunity 15 years in is, you know, the law that was written that created the structure of, if you would, the connector and health policy commission and the like, 15 years in, it also provides that opportunity to review legislation and statutory frameworks and what can be improved upon, because legislation should really be living documents and not just a one-time reform effort. And I think there's a lot of collective wisdom and a lot of collective learnings. And I really do hope, Nancy, it's not going into the adolescent years, but really using the lessons of the past 15 years to look deep in terms of what we need to do to truly tackle affordability in a different, you know, with the information we have available and forward thinking. That would be my 2 cents on that. You know, provides a marker in time. What might be, I just want to pick on something that Keisha said. It might be helpful at the next meeting is to look at the expectations of what we think the open enrollment might yield vis-a-vis the experience in the Medicaid program over the past time. And even if the federal emergency ends, or when the federal emergency ends, it starts a process of redeterminations and not a quick, nor should it be a quick eligibility redetermination process with people losing coverage. You know, we went through this once before in 2015, which almost sent me back to academia. Not really, but it will be a very consumer-centric, responsive process to ensure that individuals, if not eligible for Medicaid, have a glide path, smooth path into other opportunities like on the connector and the like. So it will be a very deliberative, very open process, just as we did in 2015. So, but to just give people a little sense, and this is a point in time, and the data is always like a month behind. The Medicaid enrollment is a point in time is at 2.1 million at this for the month of September. And just give you a year over year, FY20 average was 1.8 million and FY21 average was 1.9. So it's a significant growth in the Medicaid program in Massachusetts in enrollment. But that might be a good chart. We can provide some data. Well, you get data, but we can provide some charts as that would be helpful for people just to see what's happened over the past year.
Yep, we'd be happy to do that. And I think one of the benefits of our integrated system is that we have really great sight lines into kind of what someone's reported and what they're protected in. And we do have some great data on that we'd be happy to share at a separate thing.
Might be helpful.
And I see Faye Ruth and Mark have their hands up.
Hey, Faye Ruth. Good morning.
Good morning. I with all of the comments about affordability and the great process that was laid out around open enrollment and the community navigators, I want to say yes to many of the comments that I've made, and also just continue to lift up that this is also an equity issue and something that's central to the framework that the connector staff sort of forwarded at the beginning of the year to really center that and put that forward in all of that. And I just think it's important to really state it and make it explicit in this conversation about affordability as well.
And if I could just add in a couple of comments to the affordability conversation, and Secretary, your comments about some policy work that's been done. The Merge Market Advisory Council met for 1.5 years, and we still have not issued a report yet, which I know a lot of great work was done by a lot of great people, and I'm sure the administration at some point will make that work visible. But I know there's a lot of really good ideas that we should explore to help us with the affordability and access challenge. And so I look forward to that coming out. I just wanted to add that to the record.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. All right. Is this the time are we segueing to Audrey?
Yep.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to pull up my slides. Okay, great. Great to see you all. Good morning. I will be going through a very high level, quick rundown of various federal policy developments that the connector staff are keeping a close look at and monitoring. We'll provide an update on federal rulemaking coming out of the regulatory process that has or could have implications for Health Connector members and the Health Connector's ongoing work, as well as dynamics we're closely following in Congress that relate to the American Rescue Plan and other policies that would have implications for the connector's work and the policy landscape in which it operates. So first, on the rulemaking front, just as a reminder, CMS issues annually an expansive rule known as the Notice of Benefit and Payment Parameters, or NBPP, that sets policy for marketplaces and ACA markets generally for the upcoming benefits year. This year, CMS has issued this rule in various subparts as they revisited the prior administration's version of the NBPP, reopening the rulemaking process and reopening comment periods, and issuing new final sections of the rule for 2022. The most recent and last installment of the 2022 NBPP included a number of changes, but just a few to highlight for the board's awareness. They'll be extending the federal open enrollment period by 1 month. While this doesn't have implications for the duration of the Health Connector's open enrollment period, since we set those dates, it will likely increase national media attention, earned media, and the like to open enrollment, which we tend to benefit from. So they'll be running their open enrollment through January 15th. They've repealed a number of prior policies, including the opportunity for states to privatize exchange functions, issued some modifications to ACA Section 1332 waiver guardrails to reinstate certain consumer protections as a part of that waiver process, repeals a requirement that exchanges issue 2 separate bills for QHPs that cover non-height abortion services. And just to note that while the connector had found a pathway to dealing with this prior requirement that had avoided burdens or confusions to members or undermined access to reproductive health care services in any way, we're pleased to have this requirement clarified and repealed. And importantly, this rule also creates a new year-round special enrollment period for low-income individuals up to 150% of the federal poverty level. This actually comports with a policy approach the connector has long used for individuals up to 300% of the federal poverty level as part of connector care. So the spirit is very much in line with how we've already approached our lower income populations, but will require some modest system adjustments to comport with this new specific requirement. So that's the NBPP. Moving along to the No Surprises Act, I'm sure the board is aware in late 2020, the No Surprises Act was signed into law. This is an expansive law that introduces a number of new protections in the healthcare marketplace related to surprise billing or out-of-network billing or balance billing, creates a national floor for new consumer protections, though many states, including Massachusetts, already have robust surprise billing protections. Since its passage, HHS and other federal agencies have been rapidly issuing new rules for implementation, and the connector continues to review rulemaking for any impacts or implications to the connector itself or its members. So for example, our members starting in January will receive new ID cards from their carriers as part of new carrier responsibilities under the law. These new cards will include a clear display of deductible amounts, any out-of-pocket maximum limitations applicable to the plan, clear designation for phone and website contact information and the like. While the connector is not charged with implementing pieces of this law or this rule, will continue to monitor this space just for understanding of new consumer protections and impacts that will flow to our members generally. Moving over to the legislative space and congressional activity, we're obviously not in a position to do any political prognostication about the reconciliation bill under consideration by Congress or any timelines. We did want to keep the board apprised of draft legislative language that has come out of House committees with relevant jurisdiction like Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means that would affect the Health Connector if adopted. Most notably, the draft language coming out of these committees proposes to take the premium tax credit expansion that was enacted through the American Rescue Plan last spring, which, as the board will recall, had made premium tax credits more generous for people under 400% of the federal poverty level and newly allowed people over 400% of the federal poverty level to be eligible for tax credits to bring the cost of coverage down to 8.5% of income and would make those premium tax credits permanent. The same proposal would also extend those ARP benefits that had allowed individuals who've been on unemployment income at any point during the year and allow them to access a premium tax credit that would give them the option of a $0 health plan through an exchange. It would make that effective for each year through 2025, specific to having received unemployment income that year. A few other smaller scale policy tweaks included in the language but would require system changes for the Health Connector relate to streamlining definitions related to access to premium tax credits, like altering the calculation used to determine whether someone does or does not have access to affordable employer coverage, and also moving Social Security income lump sum payments out of the income calculation for premium tax credit eligibility, which would have the effect of making more people qualify for subsidies or more generous subsidies. The proposal also would create a new fund for states to use for reinsurance programs or programs that could be designed to reduce out-of-pocket costs. This sounds somewhat similar to the cost-sharing reduction subsidies that Connector Care offers. If passed, this annual funding would become available starting in 2023. Not listed here since there's no direct impacts to the Health Connector, but of relevance to the marketplace landscape. Some of these pieces of legislation also include new opportunities for people stuck in the Medicaid gap in states that didn't expand Medicaid as part of the ACA, and contemplates a role for the federal marketplace in filling that gap. We'll continue to keep the board apprised of this legislative package more broadly and impacts to the Health Connector. Finally, we just wanted to share a few quick updates on recent policy developments, announcements, and discussions that we've been a part of. As the board knows, we ran an extended special enrollment period through this past summer to ensure that as many Massachusetts residents as possible had the opportunity to enroll in coverage with the new American Rescue Plan subsidies. And all other marketplaces around the country, including the federal marketplace, ran similar extended enrollment periods as well. Federal HHS recently announced that together those enrollment periods resulted in 2.8 million people newly enrolling, resulting in a historically high number of Americans enrolled in marketplace coverage for a total of 12.2 million. As part of its effort to ensure the American Rescue Plan benefits were quickly and effectively implemented, HHS and CMS had made a grant funding opportunity available to state-based marketplaces for IT and outreach and other work to bring these new benefits to market. And we're pleased to report that the Connector was awarded $1.1 million for its proposal. And thank you to our CFO, Carrie Miller, for successfully leading our grant application development on that front. In the way of other timely policy topics we're actively engaged in with our sister agency, Mass Health, as well as CMS and HHS, we're continuing to plan, as Marissa and others have noted, for the eventual end of the public health emergency and all of the operational communications, member experience, and coverage details that will entail, and are closely following and engaged in discussions about how to ensure that process is as smooth as possible. Similarly, we're working with Mass Health and others to ensure health coverage for newly settling Afghan evacuees coming here to the Commonwealth and following developing guidance from CMS and HHS about coverage eligibilities for this population. And finally, a quick note on the state-based marketplace community with whom we work so closely. The ranks of the states with state-based marketplaces just grew by 3, with 3 new states, Kentucky, Maine, and New Mexico coming online this fall with new state marketplaces for 2022 open enrollment. So our community of state-based marketplaces is at its largest yet. So that rounds out the key updates we wanted to share today, just to keep the board apprised of the policy dynamics we're watching so closely and engaged in. And we'll continue to keep you posted on developments in any and all of these spaces as they may occur. And of course, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Audrey. Any questions? Anyone?
I'm loving these policy reports though, Audrey.
Keep them coming, Nancy.
Keep them coming.
Thank you, Nancy.
Can't imagine why, Nancy.
You've known me so many decades, you don't even have to say that.
I know.
Yeah. Audrey,
Yes.
if I can ask a sort of very brief question, I imagine there's a lot you could say here. It might be for another conversation, but the expansion of state-based marketplaces is just a, generally speaking, interesting phenomenon. I'm familiar with some. The typical way in which I get familiar with some is when people look for advice to Massachusetts, and as you know, I typically just send them to you all. That's like my main value is sending them to you all to do things. But there's certain things that we do in Massachusetts that I think are particularly good, how we standardize benefits, for example, some of the other policies we have around premium smoothing and stuff. We have some unique strengths in Massachusetts. Some of the support we've had additional from the state, for example, is probably different in Massachusetts than a lot of the other places. But do you have a sense of what we learn from them and what they learn from us, and how much sort of broad leadership we have in these state-based marketplaces? And if you see this as sort of a convergence of how the states are running, or a divergence of how the different states are running their state-based marketplaces?
It's such a good question. Louis, do you want to speak to it, or?
Yeah, just a couple of comments and I'll have Audrey close. We do meet regularly, at least bi-weekly, with every other state exchange director. It's organized by NASHP. And those meetings are extraordinarily helpful in sharing experience and best practice. We do learn a lot from what other states, and I bite my tongue to say it, but because California is so large and so well funded, we often look to their research efforts as well as some of their marketing concepts. So there is a lot of joint learning that takes place. I am proud of the fact that Massachusetts, I think, continues to be in front of many issues. We were the first state to recognize some of the AGI Magi challenges. I think Audrey in particular is especially respected amongst all of our peers. So that's how I would start. But Audrey, why don't I let you close?
Sure. So
could I add something, if that's okay?
Sure.
And Michael, so I did a class session a couple weeks ago in which students were put into groups, and they had to shop on one of 12 marketplaces. And then we compared what the results of that were. And then I had them vote at the end if they were shopping, which marketplace would they most hope they lived in the state of. And there were some things in some other states, particularly California standardizes benefits much more than we do. And they found that made it easier to shop. But at the end, the class was unanimous that they hoped they lived in Massachusetts because coverage here is more comprehensive and more affordable by a lot, even with the significant increases in subsidies. So that's just one small group of MPH students, but I think it was very instructive, actually.
Thank you, Nancy. The only thing I would add to your great question, Michael, is I do think I'm at least observing a bit of a confluence around certain themes about policy approaches that tend to work really well for expanding coverage. So obviously, I think there's growing interest in just having state-based marketplaces. We're seeing that by virtue of the fact that we're seeing so many more come online. And I think the CMS is particularly supportive and interested in supporting those transitions. But a few years ago, we were one of, one or two states that have state RAP programs where there's additional state investment to augment ACA subsidies. Now off the top of my head, I can think of 5 or 6 that are doing that, and others who are intensifying their interest in exploration of being able to do something like that sort of deepens affordability supports for their populations. And so we do end up in a lot of conversations about kind of the mechanics just of how you move those kinds of funds around and design programs to support efforts like that. So I think we're definitely seeing that. I think we've had the privilege of getting to play a role in being, helpful resources and sounding boards to states thinking about those kinds of approaches. But I think also to your question, Michael, I would say we learn a lot from other states too. There's always initiatives we're hearing about from other state-based marketplaces. Maryland has really innovated in the space of trying to kind of streamline enrollment through their tax system that helped inform some of our thinking around how we could work with our Department of Revenue. They're launching a new subsidy that's specific for younger individuals that they're trying to target to increase insurance access for. So while I think we've been fortunate to be able to be kind of a guidepost for certain kinds of policy tools, there's certainly other places where we're looking for inspiration and get great ideas from our peer exchanges. So like Lewis said, the mutual conversations we have are really a gift to the work we do.
Anybody else? Louis, is there any other business before the board?
No, that's it for this morning.
No, it sort of seems like plenty. The one thing I just want to put on, and this is a perennial, and if Jason's on, he'll be sorry, I'm probably bringing this up, is that as we go into open enrollment, and we have very high rate of coverage in Massachusetts, we continue to have 3% of the population that is not covered. And it hasn't really changed much in terms of who we have not found the opportunity to engage in a way that gets them over the finish line or connects them with the importance of health insurance. So I am hoping that once again, we will think creatively. I know you always think creatively, so I don't mean it that way, but really out of the box on addressing whatever the hesitancy is around healthcare coverage. And the one lesson, and as my spouse will say, I can change every conversation into a COVID conversation. So I don't mean to, but one of the lessons, for all the good things we're doing around vaccine administration in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and now over 90% of adults have had at least one dose, and we're second only to that county in Vermont. Sorry to the state of Vermont in terms of fully vaccinated folks, but we have been engaged in a very intentional vaccine canvassing campaign in communities by trusted community folks to reach individuals around trust, and it's a ground action. It's really as it needs to be, and I really do think that it is not just marketing. I don't want to see ads in the Boston Globe. I don't, those might be fine, but that is not how we're going to reach those individuals for whom, I mean, it's not a failure of anybody. It is just an opportunity not yet realized. And I really would be remiss if I just didn't put it once again back on the table to continue to narrow that down and build on our successes, but use our successes, nice cat there, Matt, to lean in even more, right? It's like we take our success as that next challenge. So I'll stop. And I know you all feel it and live it, but I would be remiss if I just didn't say
Well, and we deeply share your sense of the timing and necessity of this. Last month, I asked Audrey to, from top to bottom, examine everything we're going to do on a marketing and communications level, up to and including sites of our community walk-in centers, what we're doing for media and messaging, because as you know, we had an aggressive marketing campaign over the summer.
Yeah.
It did not result in a lot of movement. And so I think we need to really, I feel like in 2015-16, we really revamped our ethnic outreach. But I think it's time when we really need to re-examine where we are now and build from the bottom upwards. So we're very much in line with that, and we're hoping that we might be able to discuss that in the context of a strategic board meeting in December.
I'm not going back in time. Great.
I know.
Yeah, Dimitri.
I know we spent a great deal of time over the past few years looking into that 3% and how can we have greater access to that 3% in order to get those folks coverage. The question I would ask of the team is whether or not over the last couple of years we have gained any insight in terms of who are the 3% that is still uninsured. And also, as Louis alluded to, maybe revising some of our approach with regard to the marketing campaign to make sure that we're taking a more laser focused approach and more targeted approach to reaching that 3% that seems to be very difficult to get a hold of. You know, it's interesting. We spent a lot of time talking about the 3%. I was in Chicago a couple of weeks ago and in a meeting, and we were discussing unemployment rate and uninsured rate, and someone mentioned 37% uninsured, and I was like, okay, did I hear that wrong? So I'm very proud to be living in a state with 3% uninsured, and we're working very hard to try to get that 3% insured. So we have to appreciate some of the work that the connector is doing in outreaching to the population.
I think I'd like to combine the topics of who are the 3%, how do we revamp top to bottom our outreach, and also the new tools that are becoming available, and in particular for us, the DOR connection that will, for the first time, allow us to start reaching out to people who report lack of insurance on their state income tax and make an offer to them that they, with their permission, make an offer to them that they could find affordability on the connector. So I'd like to bring all three of those topics to a strategic planning meeting in December that we'll be happy to update people along the way.
Great.
Louis, could I also suggest we have someone from CHIA come over and talk about their latest report with regard to the pressure that state mandates have on premium dollars? I think this our board would find it very enlightening.
I will, as a first stop on that, Mark, I will educate myself with CHIA, and we're glad to discuss issues of that.
I could just add to that point that, affordability obviously is the Holy Grail. To Dimitri's question, the people who are still uninsured look exactly like today, look exactly like the people who were uninsured back in 2010. And I think the thing that's most relevant for us is 2/3 of them have incomes below 150% of the poverty level. So many of them should be eligible for actually free health insurance. And I think that's the number that just continues to, both trouble, but also I think should give us some hope that we actually have something for them that's affordable. Right. We just have to get them to enroll.
Right. We just have to find the connection.
Yeah.
So thanks, Nancy. All right. Any other business before the board? If not, Louis?
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say no on the connectors part.
All right. All right. Well, then, may I please have a motion to dismiss?
So moved.
So moved.
All right. Well, I think that Mark and Dimitri is a first and a second there. And I'm assuming there's no further discussion about the motion to dismiss. So Kathy, if we could have the roll call, please.
Absolutely. Kevin?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Hey, Ruth?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Cassandra?
Yes.
Keisha?
Yes.
Dimitri?
Yes.
Secretary?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Rena?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Motion carries. I want to thank the connector staff for working through the call center transition. I want to thank the board. Keisha, welcome. And I hope everyone stays well, be well, and we will connect again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you.